So welcome to the Symphony Learning Series for Menu Item Maintenance Part 1. The agenda for this short meeting will be masters, definitions, and prices, followed by filtering after you click search, and then we'll do an example of adding a new menu item. So first, for masters, definitions, and prices, we want to load the menu item maintenance module from the property level. This is important because masters only exist at the property level. Master records cannot be created at the individual revenue center levels. In the very first Symphony Learning Series about hierarchy, we discussed all the various levels from the enterprise level, property level, revenue center level. You can place records at the revenue center level and it may override what's at the property level. However, you cannot do that with a master. Master records can only be created and exist and edit at the property level. When you launch the menu item maintenance module, you'll see the menu item master, menu item definition, and menu item price in the record type dropdown on the left panel, which correlate to the three tabs at the bottom of the screen, masters, definitions, and prices. If you select the record type there in the dropdown before you click search, then when you complete the search, you'll land on that tab automatically. If you don't, it's fine. You can freely select those tabs at the bottom of the screen independently after you've completed the search. So let's start out going through each column on the Master Records tab. Once again, I'm at the property level here. You can see that in the zone, location, and inheritance type columns. It shows the level we're at, and we know that we're on the Master Records tab, and these records are white, meaning they're editable, other than the headers sections for soups and salads. You see those are inherited from the enterprise level, which are grayed out. So we know we're at the property level here, and we can see the Master Records. When you're on this Master Records tab in the far left, the first column you'll see is always unique, and that is the unique identifier, the record number for each of the menu items. The first three digits line up with the family group. So if you look to the right, you'll see the family group column. Those three-digit numbers are the first three digits of the record number, followed by 5 numbers starting with 00001. So you have up to 99,999 records within each family group to be able to add your records. The next column is the name. This name on the Master Records tab is the name that will show up in reporting and analytics and on all of your reports. And that's important to note because we'll see on the Definition Records tab some other names, first name, second name, third name, and those can all be configured differently. But what shows up in your reports is what's on this tab for Master Records. As discussed in Symphony Learning Series 1 and mentioned just a moment ago, the zone, location, and inheritance type show you the level that you're at. And arguably most importantly, on the Master Records tab is the major group and family group. All of the owned and managed properties will be familiar with major group as the mapping that goes to shared services. So it's incredibly important that the major group is correct here on the master record. So major group 1 being food, that's what's actually mapped to your GL accounts in Oracle Financials from the Symphony exports. The family group, although still important, isn't used by shared services. It's simply a subdivider within the major group. So in this case, in this example, these family groups are all correlated to the type of food, right? Appetizers, soups, salads. In Hyatt, we don't use master groups, and report groups, we simply align with the major group. So the report group number should always match the number of the major group. In this case, everything's 1 because all the major groups shown in this example are food. And lastly, for options, we don't really use that. We can. It's simply one option you can turn on or off that will allow this menu item to be edited on a workstation directly, whether that's the price or the definition name. So you can turn that on through PMC, which allows you to edit those menu items or not edit those menu items through PMC. Next, I'm going to switch to the Definition Records tab, and we'll go through these columns so you can see what each correlates with. Once again, we have the same record numbers that tie in from the Master Records tab. However, on the Definition Records tab, you might find that some of those record numbers repeat, and that's because they have a second or third definition sequence number. In this case, you see the tortilla soup has 2 definition sequence numbers, the SW salad or Southwest salad has 2, and the baby wedge salad has 2. And the reason for having more than one definition under one master is that if something is different In this case, if you look all the way over to the SLU, the SLU column, you'll notice that the second tortilla soup, the second Southwest salad, and the second baby wedge salad each have a different SLU assigned. So it's the same definition, but the SLU is different because one is for the restaurant and one is for in-room dining in this example. So you have the same master, meaning you're going to get the same count on the same totals in your reporting off that tortilla soup or Southwest salad or baby wedge salad, but the definition is different. You have a second definition because it's assigned to more than one SLU. The first name column is typically and by default the name that shows up on the button on the Symphony screen. It's the name that shows up on the kitchen printer or a bar printer, and it's the name that shows up on the customer receipt and guest check. Those can be configured differently if you have options set in menu item classes to use second name or even third name for those 3 different options. So you could have them entered separately if you wanted to do an abbreviation for the kitchen text example so it wouldn't wrap. That's all configurable in menu item class options. And we'll cover that a little bit more in part 2 when we get into the intermediate menu item maintenance. For today, we're just looking through the columns here. We're looking at menu item classes and making sure that the menu item class that we want is what's assigned. The menu item class is essentially the behavior of the menu item. How does it act? Does it get taxed? Does it prompt for a seat number or not? Does it prompt you for a meat temperature or a salad protein or topping or dressing, for example? The print class override is where does this item print in the kitchen or in the bar? Which printers does it go to? And the override is because you don't have to assign a print class override. If you don't, you'll see the grayed out examples are 0, use menu item class settings. So if you have the print class override set to 0, then instead of using this column, it'll actually look to the menu item class and see what print class is assigned there and use that. It's nice to have this print class override all entered because that is the easiest way for you to see at a glance which kitchen printers or bar printers are assigned to this particular menu item. But just know that you may also have that assigned in the menu item class if your print class overrides are set to 0. It's not overriding whatever's set to the menu item class. Next is the main level and sub-level. You can think of these as a sort of on-off switch for the menu item. If you're ever deactivating a menu item, removing it from the screens so that it can't be rung in, but not deleting it, so you're not removing any historical sales data, you could simply change the main level or sub-level or both to 0, 0 or all off in order to remove that from the screens. You could also remove it from SLUs on the right, but generally the main level by standard typically refers to the various revenue centers on your property, and the sub-level refers to the various price levels. Typically, we would have a happy hour sub-level, perhaps, or Rocks Martini Manhattan could be your sub-levels for pricing and beverage. The value that's shown here, the FF or the 00 or a combination other, the hex value, is basically just which checkboxes are checked. So if you click the little ... ellipsis button to the right, you'll actually see the checkboxes for the different main levels that are active or the sub-levels that are active there. But as a shortcut, you can set those to FF for all on or 00 for all off without having to pop up the ellipsis button. I referred to SLU earlier. Screen lookup is related to which screen in Symphony the item's going to show up on. So if you're actually on the workstation, you'll see the screen lookup referred to in these categories. In this example, we have appetizers, soup, salads, or the IRD example I used earlier for the tortilla soup, the other items with second definitions. So it's important to note your SLU, your SLU, is related to where on the workstation, which screen it's going to show up in. We don't use the MMH SLU. You can ignore that column. That's for mobile micros handheld SLUs. The tablets that we use in most of our properties that have wireless do not use that MMH SLU. They just use the standard SLU as a regular workstation. And the last column here is the SLU sort priority. You can, if you have this option activated in page design, activate the sort priority, so you can actually sort the items based on the number you put there, lowest to highest within the SLU. So because I have 3, 0, 1, and 2 in the soups section, 0 will be first. So the second definition of tortilla soup would be first, then soup of the day, then the cup of tortilla soup, and then tortilla soup on the first line would show in that order in this SLU, if that SLU sort priority is activated in page design. And lastly, I want to share the price records tab. This one's much more swift. We don't have a lot to configure here. We have the same record number, the definition sequence numbers that are both pulled from the definition records tab, as well as the definition name. So none of those are editable here. That's just pulling from the previous tabs. What is the first column here that's unique is the price sequence number. So similar to the definition sequence number on the definition records tab, here is where you can have multiple price records for one definition sequence. So in this case, we have 3 price sequences for each of these beverage examples. And I used beverage because it is the more complicated type of price records. In this case, we have the regular price, the double price, and the martini or rocks price. If you look to the far right column on the active on level, you'll see that's what's different between each of the 3 price records. And that's why we have 3 different prices for each of these beverages in this example. So the 3 Cuervo Golds, the first one you see is $13.50. If you look over to the far right, you'll see that's the double price. The $11.25 Cuervo Gold, that's the martini or rocks price. And then the $9 Cuervo Gold is set to 0 all levels, which would catch any other, including regular. The reason we put all levels last is because as Symphony is looking for which level you're set to, it starts at the top and works sequentially down. So if you put your first price sequence number 1 as 0 all levels, that's going to catch first, and you're never going to make it past that to your double or martini. So it's important for your beverages, if you're configuring happy hour prices or double martini rocks prices, you always put the all levels as the last price sequence number record to catch anything else that wasn't already previously specified. You can use the prep cost column. In this example, I just have it all set to zeros. But if you put in your food cost or your beverage cost here for each item, then you can actually pull food cost reports and look historically over time. When you update these, it's maintained in the database when the changes are made. So you could actually do a year to date and see the various prep costs that you've entered when you've updated them. So if you updated your prep costs monthly or quarterly, it would actually retain that historical data to be able to run a year-to-date prep cost analysis. Tax class override and service charge group are typically not used, but they are a way on a particular record to override whatever's set in the menu item class to be specific to this definition. So you could have a specific tax class that's different for this item or a service charge group that's different, but we typically do not use those. I already discussed the active on level. The most important thing to remember is all levels is last. And for all the food items, typically everything's just set to 0, all levels, and that's active on all levels. Next, I would like to talk about filtering. When you're in the menu item maintenance module, after you click the search button on the bottom left, you have the ability to then filter all the data that you've pulled up. I always recommend just clicking search. You don't need to specify your major group, family group, master group, or object number or name before clicking search, because it's a pretty quick search to get the full database. And once you have it fully loaded, then you can use that filter independently and make sure that you're seeing everything by not prior filtering it with that search criteria. So I've shown in this screenshot all the possible selections you can make on the definition records tab, where you can select how you're showing records, where the first name or second name or the zone or location or even the menu item class, the SLU. You can filter any of these items by the next column, whether it contains the text, does not contain the text, is equal to, not equal to, starts with, does not start with, ends with, does not end with. So in this example, I'm pulling up all records where the first name contains the text fish. And when you click that filter now button, you'll see the example in this database. We see fish taco, we see the category header fish and seafood, and we see the kids fish item. So these are all the items whose first name contain the text fish. The cool thing about filtering is you can stack filters one on top of the other. So if I add another filter now, it's going to keep the fish first name. And now when I put in first name contains the text taco, now I'm going to see fish tacos, because that's the only thing in the database that contains both fish and taco in the first name. If I wanted to see everything in the database with taco without that fish filter that I already put, then you'd have to use that clear and run link over on the far right. That will clear previous filters and allow you to filter just based on the filter you currently have there, which is set to first name contains the text taco. So when you click clear and run, now you'll see we have pork taco and fish taco because there were more than one taco, which we didn't see when it was filtered by fish as well. So really handy tool for filtering, a lot easier than having to click search and wait through that loading time every time you want to find a particular item. And lastly, today I'd like to wrap up by showing how to add a new menu item in a basic example using a property level menu item master definition and price and using a template. So in this example, I'd like to add a new burger. We'll call it a test burger. And I want to find an item, probably by using that filter function, that does exactly the same thing that I want this new one to do. So in my example here, I've highlighted the Strauss burger because it's in the food major group and it's in the sandwiches savory family group. I'm going to go over to the definition records tab next and see how it behaves in that menu item class. You can see the menu item class for the Strauss burger requires a meat temperature and a side choice. So that's the same behavior that I'm looking for in my new test burger. So that's the reason I'm picking this Strauss burger. You can see the main level and sub level are set to FF, which means all on, all active, and the slew is set to sandwiches. So that's all exactly the same as I want. And then lastly, on the price records tab, my Strauss burger here is set on all levels and it's set to $14, which is exactly the same. If it was just the price that was different, I could specify that in creating the new item as well. But in this case, it matches exactly with the test burger I want to make. So before I click the insert record icon, I want to make sure I'm on the master records tab at the property level to create the new item. If you're not on the master records tab, you're not going to see the same options in the dropdown when you try to create a new menu item. You have to start on the master records tab on the far left first, because you have to have a master before you can add any definitions or prices to it. So then you want to click on the insert record after you've highlighted your template item. You can click the green plus icon up on the top bar, or you can just push the insert key on your keyboard as a shortcut. When you push that, the pop-up that then shows will be the add menu items pop-up. And by default, as long as you're on the master records tab and you've highlighted the item you want as your template, you will see that the select a task to perform dropdown is set to add master record from template. This is what we want. We want to add a new master from a template. And really, the only things we need to add here are the name of our new test burger in this example, as well as the price we want to set. And in my example here, I said it's the same, so I'm just going to leave that at $14. So I just put the name and the price, and that's it. You can see that the class is already there. It's the require meat temp side. We saw that the levels were right. We have active on all main and sub levels with FF. So we're just going to create this test burger, $14. Click OK, and you'll get a pop-up confirming that the record was added successfully. Would you like to add another menu item based on the same master to copy, the Strauss burger? In this case, no. I just wanted to add the one test burger, so I'll click no. And you'll see that your new test burger is assigned in the next available record number there. You could specify a different record, but it's by default going to give you the next available one. So there it is, 103-00014 test burger. And if you scroll through the definition records and price records tabs, you'll see that everything is identical to the Strauss burger. So you're all set, and it's really that easy. That is the most simple example. We'll get into more complicated ones in parts 2, 3, and 4 of menu item maintenance in the coming Symphony Learning series, but that's it for today. So to recap, we covered master records, definition records, and price records. We looked at filtering after you click search as a way to further find what items you're looking for in the database. And then we used a simple example of adding a new menu item at the property level from a template.